Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Aarti Nagaraj, editor of Gulf Business, and we are very, very pleased today to have with us His Excellencies Mohammed Al Kuwaiti. He's the head of the UAE Cybersecurity Council, and we also have with us Igal Una. He is the head of the Israeli Cybersecurity division. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're talking on a very, very interesting topic, cybersecurity. It's like though we are in an air show, we're still talking about cybersecurity. So that gives us an idea about how big of an issue it is and how much of importance it has, especially in these areas. So to start with, give us an idea about the cyber threat landscape within the aviation industry itself. If we can start with you.
Thank you very much, and allow me here to start, Your Excellency, as well. And this today, having Dubai Airshow as one of the main pillars of hosting all of those aviations, industries, people, expertise, and even different nations who helped actually making up this sector and making up this whole aspects of what we allows us to communicate and travel wherever we want in an easy way on that safely. And that's the most important word, safely. And by safely, we mean when we talk about our basically theme is cybersecurity.
Correct.
Cybersecurity touches upon different aspects of that aviation, not only from the infrastructure itself, but also from the cabinet itself of that aircraft to the IoTs and many of the entertainment systems that is actually embedded in that aircraft, to the communication and the ticketing systems that people, they actually do many of those aspects. So technologies is across every single subsystem of that big ecosystem on that perspective. And this will always dictate the importance of securing every subsystems of those to accumulatively work on securing the bigger picture.
Yep.
And that security it's again, we were talking about this, it's not only securing the technology itself or the information itself, but even the people, because as we also know in the cybersecurity is people are the weakest link.
Correct. Correct.
Sometimes they're the one who, click this, open this, or by mistake do this or that, and this is what opens vulnerabilities and allow many of those cyber attacks happens. So yes, cybersecurity touches upon all of those regulations, procedures, technologies, and even training and people capacity building across the whole sector. And we cannot do this by ourselves. That's why we have everybody here. And our partner as well in this perspective, His Excellency, as we work in many of those aspects together as well, he can give some of those insights, please.
Thank you for having us. It's really fantastic to come over for, I don't even recall how many times already since we signed the agreement just a year and a couple of months ago.
Last August, yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
last
yeah.
August. And that's a good symbol of a strong friendship and strong partnership, which is important between human beings and people all the time. But in cybersecurity, it's crucial. You cannot succeed, as my dear friend, His Excellency mentioned, you cannot succeed working alone. Not a single agency and not a single country. And lucky for us, UAE and Israel is banding together and working together very closely to mitigate the threats. And you asked about the threats.
Correct.
Well, the threats in this world, and the headlines here are digital transformation. This is the most rapid revolution that the world is going through this couple of years. It's less than a decade if you take a look at this. And one of the aspects is transportation. In transportation, aviation is maybe the most connected, most complicated in terms of connectivity and technology bringing together. Now, the speed of airplanes is like 1 Mach or a little less. But the speed of designing new vessels and designing new technologies and implementing them is little slower. So if you take a look at even the best vessel by Boeing or Airbus that are showing here in the Dubai Fantastic Air Show, well, they are designed maybe 12 years before they even have the first flight.
Correct, correct.
Technology and digital technology in these times, well, multiplies a couple of times more and more exponential. so are the threats. So we need to find a paradigm that works in aviation that is not needed or adjustable to other fields of transportation or other fields at all. Healthcare moves slower.
Correct.
So you need to adjust solutions to highly connected arena on one term and not asymmetry
Sure.
of aviation technologies versus digital technologies, that the cracks between these asymmetries and speeds, this is the field that the bad guys, the hackers, thriving and try to get inside. And that's what we need to focus. And again, only by partnering and working together can be achieved, not by government only. It's public and private partnerships. It's also with the great companies, airlines, airports, everyone that shows here and others, we must work together. The good news, it's a community. The aviation community is used to work together,
Right.
as the cybersecurity community. Now it's just bonding together and making aviation much safer.
Couple of interesting points you mentioned, one about digital transformation, and I think during COVID-19, the term, if I can say for sure, that we've used the most across every story practically we've written is digital transformation. I mean, the pandemic has ensured that every single industry has to immediately transform. I mean, it's not optional anymore, right? So in an industry like you rightly mentioned, like aviation, which is process-driven, takes time, how do you make sure that systems are agile and in line with, how do you get that symmetry in place? How do you manage that?
So I'll give my perspective on that, but I will start with that transformation and digital transformation with the pandemic and how it really accelerated and enabled many of those businesses to quickly go into many of those adaptation of technology. With all of the beauty that allows people to work from home and students to study from home and do many of those things from home, it as well brought the vulnerabilities and the risk of actually not securing and taking the standard operation procedures of really securing their systems. And this is what really added and increased many of those cyber attacks. We saw that across the whole year of the pandemic. We saw the increase of phishing emails, for example, that uses many of this pandemic accordingly. We saw many of those victims who really suffered the breach of their data because of such a quick transformation towards this aspect. Yes, we applaud all of those cybersecurity personnels, companies, entities who helped in ensuring that connectivity is there, ensuring that infrastructure is ready to be adopted by many of those entities. And this is really an effort that they are really did greatly across all of that year and continually doing that every now and then. Now, the agility of adapting with any of those systems that is, let's say, conventional or not really, as His Excellency mentioned, up to date to the edge of technology with all of the communication and artificial intelligence and the blockchains and many of those technology, because reliability for them and dependability is always important.
Correct.
They have a resiliency in their systems that is reached up to 99.69s. And this what really give this importance to their industries and give this importance to the reliability of their aircraft and the procedure that they take in order to double check the integration of any changes they do on the aviation system with the other entertainment system, with the other intercom system, with many of those things. It's really truly going through a whole exhaustive testing in that. So, and this is back to His Excellency point, this is why the interconnected work between each one of those developers of those systems is very important. Yes, it takes times, but it needs to be started as quick as possible. The good thing is that it's already started.
Okay.
Many of those entities, industries, the big names, Boeing, Airbus, and many of those providers have really adopted some of those technologies in order to keep up adapting and embracing those technologies. So the interoperation between many of those systems is important. The real integration that need to go into a thoroughly testing, standardization, and regulations that need to be there is as well as important as implementing many of those technologies. And this is maybe we'll see the challenge. You mentioned some of those challenges is those regulation and certification of many of those steps that need to be adapting this new technologies. And this is what we see happening now. Definitely together we can do it and really expedite that pace as we go.
And how, like he mentioned, I think it's working together. At what stage in the process is regulatory oversight important from in your perspective? Is it, from stage one, or does it come in a little bit later?
Oh, it's a great question because, well, in aviation, more than any other field, I think, regulation is something that is very strong. Standardization.
Correct.
You cannot, an airplane cannot take off anywhere in the world without following the same protocol, the same standard that is the same with any other airport. That's amazing. Talking about the globe, about the mankind, about diversity, about anything. And that's the beauty, and that's why aviation is still not maybe, the safest way to transport. And see how many people comes from abroad to this airport, to this air show. So we trust it. Why we trust it? Because it follows the same rules, regulation. Now, in cybersecurity, I speak on the Israel behalf. I wish I had this kind of regulation implemented in all IT, in all the digital industry, as we have in aviation. But in aviation, because of the gravity, the magnitude of an errors, it should be much more strict, much more precise regulation and standardization. That's a very fertile ground for cybersecurity measures. And that's the convergence or the coordination that need to be done between the industry, the operators, the governments, to build together regulation. It's not coming just, from a crazy regulator somewhere, or with the government just saying do this or do that. It should be by design. From the very early stages, standards and regulation dealing with all aviation regarding digital and counter-digital threats, meaning cybersecurity.
Is that already happening, in your opinion?
I think yes. I think we see, even here in this air show, we have many representatives on executive level from ICAO, the United Nations Aviation Organization. We have from many other agencies. They're all working together. It's common to meet old friends from the industry, from aviation industry, because it must be. You cannot work alone in the aviation. So they're here. We're already discussing. There are some initiatives that began on the way, but again, the speed. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the speed of digital is much faster than regulation, than governments, than big organizations moves. So we need to pace up and meet be more agile, but very strict with standardization to meet the pace and the speed that needed to be met in this industry.
You work...
If you allow me here, His Excellency touched upon a very important lessons learned through history that we saw. So in the 80s, when the introduction of cockpit, locking the door, and many of those initially came from, again, Israel. And then 9/11 happened, where people lost trust on the transportation. Until this trust gained back, those standards, those regulations really was shown there through all of those transportation entities, where they assured them and ensured them it's not only locked, but there is a security agency personnel is there. There is a security checks even prior to boarding the plane. So these really build this trust again to those consumers and many of the customers. Then the biological pandemic hit. The biological pandemic really, again, allowed us to lose trust on the kind of the medicine. Why 1 year and there is still no medicine, nobody is here. But the good thing, life is coming back. This is one of great testimonial, and that life is coming back because people adapt. People really have this practices that they do. Agility from wearing a mask, social distancing, as well as hygienes, and keeping in many of those aspects really vaccinations, doing a lot of things, and this build the trust again, allow this life to come in that perspective. Now bringing this to the cyber arena. So if we can build that trust on the cyber world, with all of the threat landscape that added, with many of those things, definitely would love to see those standardization really followed and really done on that. But again, many of those is not happening. So if we can allow and spread that awareness, culture of cybersecurity, allow people to really think again, think twice, 3 times before clicking or opening an attachment, opening an email, reading an email, or opening even any of those applications that are not legitimately authenticated in there. So this is again for a personal level. What about for a system level? Allowing those entities to really follow those standard operation procedures, those standards of, again, they have been there for a long time, ISO 27009, for example, or 001. So it's there. Build this culture, allow this to happen there, and this will really bring us to a secure and safe environment as well.
So what are the challenges preventing that from happening already? Like you said, many of these systems have been in place for years. Cybersecurity is an issue we've been discussing for years as well. And globally, everybody's aware that technology is going at the fastest pace we've ever seen. And alongside technology, as much as you see progress, there is the threat landscape that's increasing as well. So what is holding back this standardized adoption of cybersecurity, of best practices globally?
So one of the points, if you allow me, Roxanne, to start here is technology is going very fast. And we are lacking behind from regulation, from policies, from procedures. And again, sometimes it's good. Definitely we want this technology to surpass in many of those aspects, but the problem with that, every technology you introduce, there is vulnerability on it. There is a whole entity, forums, people who, as we communicate to secure, their job is to communicate to attack. And their job is to really find those vulnerabilities. And so one part of it is this. The technology goes fast, vulnerabilities increase, and many of those aspects actually happening on this. The second one is profit-driven. Many of those technologies, they don't have a security in design from the beginning. They think of it as a profit. I want to roll out my product today to really break the market. And security, is not as important as getting that profit quickly out. And this, you will see it in the applications. Everybody has an application, just design it, send it there with many holes, many vulnerabilities, which allows, again, an attack back to this system. So it's a profit-driven. And the third one is people. We take things for granted. We take it, it's secure. We don't really care more about security than the friendliness of the application of technologies and the use of that.
Right.
That's why we from our, and this is the humanity type of aspects, we are more leaning towards making and taking things easily, because some people think of security as a burden. If I need security, then I will limit myself to use those and this and that. So this is where it needs to be actually culture of cybersecurity. It needs to spread this awareness and help them. So yes, the fast emerging technologies, the profit-driven type of aspects without thinking of it, and the people who need to actually work together.
After these fantastic, strong words, it's hard to add. I must say that I don't see too many challenges. The fact that we're still not there is mainly because of COVID-19, that stopped and slowed things down. Just before the COVID-19 eruption, we had a very strong and deep discussions with some of the major vendors,
Okay.
Boeing, Airbus, about moving forward with some airports. The year and a half of the pandemic slowed things down because all the industry, all the aviation industry. So now we see it's coming back with a boost. And the Dubai Airshow is a good example of the optimism and the trend and the tendency that this community is going, or the way it's leading. And we in cybersecurity, we just need to see that we can bring together our expertise, UAE, Israel, and other like-minded strong fellows that we have, with the standardization agencies, with the industry, which is here, and Israel has a strong, which is represented here, strong aviation and cybersecurity industry combined, and together it's just getting up early in the morning, not in the usual hour, early in the morning, begin to work hard until we finish it. It's achievable. It can be done very fast.
Quickly, very quickly.
Yes.
You touched upon, joint collaboration. Can you give us an idea about what you're working on right now and where you see collaborations headed?
One important thing to understand is cybersecurity threats are crosses many borders. It's
Correct.
not only staying or basically initiating from one. It's a transnational type of threats, and this is why the importance of such collaboration is always important, specifically in knowing the source of that threat. Attribution, we call it in this perspective. So many of those attacks in, for example, the civil aviation or on oil and gas or on healthcare. For example, Israel was really hit with many of those attacks from ransomware.
Yep.
And many of those information and lessons learned and how to defend from those ransomware really helped not only us, but the whole community. They really publish a great information on those and what is the attackers' procedures, what are the escalation of a privilege that they use, what are the indicator of compromises, and all of those, we take it, we implement it, and we really defend, and this is where the partnership comes. This is where the lessons learned comes. And you see this because the CERT, the Computer Emergency Response Teams, they really share many of this information to defend many of those aspects. So ransomware is one of those aspects, and the other one is critical infrastructure attacks, things that hits core, again, from many of those critical infrastructure, oil and gas, and aviation, for example, as well. So reverse engineering and knowing what is the indicator of an attack is really important, and these are some of those items that we definitely work on.
And yeah, if you can add anything.
Oh, yes, not much to be added, but we immediately bonded with the UAE. UAE has a very strong digital vision and implementation, a very advanced, very progressive, and very easy to connect with. So Israel has strong data, digital industry, and also we have our, so it was like immediate bonding, immediate connection, because once you have a common language, it's much easier, and a common vision, the common goals, and also a common neighborhood. That we enjoy the same weather, and we suffer from the same, some of the threat actors that are aiming to destabilize this, the region or the Middle East overall. So that's bring us together, but we see much more opportunities than threats, and that's worth mentioning. We're here to build a strong capacity building of future, digital future, strong, secure digital future. There are much more opportunities than threats. We just need to counter the threats and put them away, to minimize them, that they will not cross our way to the digital transformation, the thriving of our people.
You spoke about critical infrastructure assets as well, and that's where when you have sensitive areas like, let's say, defense, we have defense military representation here as well. So those areas, how much of collaboration is possible? I know this may be a bit sensitive, but just to understand how much of collaboration is possible from a cybersecurity perspective beforehand, how much of awareness do you have beforehand, and how much can you realistically achieve in the current scenario?
So, from a UAE government perspective, after the Abraham Accord signage, there were more than high-level delegations, about 20 visits there. There are more than 30-something memorandum of understanding as well as joint project worked between both nations. And we're not talking here about only cybersecurity, but across all of those aspects. Food security was one of the most important things that we actually worked on, and there is a huge online, you will see many of those projects that multi-millions or billions actually project that is already in place of such joint relationship. In addition to that, there is the communication and telecommunication as well as even the international relations actually that is signed on those aspects. There is the attraction and the tourism that is really touched upon, even building the Abraham Accord Museum here in Saadiyat Island to build many of those aspects. So it is an actual project in place. It is an open relationship that is touched upon many of those multi-billion on those infrastructure, and it is a continuous to actually touch upon any of those sectors. With those sectors, there is always cybersecurity. You need to protect those cybersecurity. So definitely there is a relationship, alhamdulillah, and there is many of those aspects that is in place and executed actually. So it's not something that we will do, it's already done.
Fair enough. And in terms of new technologies that are you looking at developing new technologies? I know quantum AI is something you've spoken about earlier. So is that a technology that, let's say in a sector like aviation, there is scope to integrate in terms of our cybersecurity, better preparation?
I will refer to again, some of the educational memorandum of understanding signed between Haifa University as well as Abu Dhabi University or Zaid University here, or MBZ AI University in UAE, with many of the universities in Israel. The idea is to really stimulate that research and development across all of those sectors and really build up that ecosystem. Israel is very well known about building that ecosystem, taking that technology and really putting it into a business aspect and allow it to really foster and really strive towards, again, a globalization in this aspect. And this is where such of those relationship is happening. Quantum computing and the research and development that's happening there, definitely it's one of the areas of focus that we have. We have the Abu Dhabi Council for Research and Development is focused on many of those quantum computing research and development with some of the universities locally here as well as internationally. And it is definitely a game changer in many of those aspects. And this where it will increase the processing speed, and that's what we need in many of those attacks, as a matter of fact. And with all of this great, huge, big data that we would love to easily swift across many of those data, identify the abnormalities and the patterns, and really work on this. So definitely the AI as well as the quantum will help in many of those things. Maybe quantum is early to mention that, but it's an initial stages allows us to do many of those bringing physics and technologies and really allowing this to help the speed of processing, definitely.
And from an Israeli INCD perspective, any new technologies that you already have in place that you can share about how, whether it's ransomware or phishing or DODS, how do you, preempt those kind of attacks and
well, we already have building up some countermeasures that on a national level, like we have the Iron Dome, counter missiles that are launched to Israel, which is pretty effective, more than 95% of hitting those who are aimed to population. We are now developing a Cyber Dome to protect the Israeli cyberspace from the analogy from cyber missiles. And we have that. It's much more difficult because it deals, well, I don't know about the difficulty. It's difficult enough to deal with many aspects of many kinds of hiding and crawling hacking techniques.
Correct.
But we do manage, and we have only less than one hand, five fingers, less than this kind of events of magnitude that actually hit the Israeli cyberspace because of some of the measures. We're not happy with that. We want zero. In our critical infrastructures, we have zero. This depends on technology, but the main thing in technology, in cybersecurity, the great thing that you invented today, tomorrow it's obsolete, because the speed, as I mentioned, speed is too much. So one of the ideas is how to build technology that is more agile and more adjusted to changes.
How do you deal with that? That's the thing, right? Like, if it's going to become obsolete tomorrow, so are you building technology for day after? I mean, how is the process?
You need a different paradigms. You need a different approach, and that's the beauty. I'm in the business more than 33 years, and my kids laugh at me and say, how can you do something for too many years? It's the same thing all the time. I say, no, it's not. One day looks like the other day. It's every new day brings a new things because of combination of people with all the combinations of things that the people can do, and with technology that evolves all the time, and data technology. So AI, you have adversarial AI, for example. You have many ways to manipulate human thinking using AI technology that we need to counter it. For example, for autonomous vehicles that identify stop signs, and you can fool that and cause accidents, and many others. Any new thing that the good people all around the world, in UAE, in Israel, invent, there's immediately some bad people that try to abuse it, that try to make the bad out of it. So we need to run faster and find different paradigms of technologies that can be built to hold it back. But again, everything that one human being invented, another human being can undo or harm. That's mankind. We need to run a little faster from the bad guys.
Lastly, what's your outlook for the civil, looking at aviation, cybersecurity, overall, like just an outlook for the future? I mean, we're looking in the next 50 years here, all the discussion is about autonomous, transport, vehicles that will just take off and land in between where we are right now, probably, like we'll be moving, flying in different drones. So again, I think, as you mentioned rightly, as you start creating one thing, there's a problem being created on the other side. So how is the cybersecurity landscape going to deal with everything that's coming up in the future?
So cybersecurity definitely is keeping with that technology advancements. And technology is really surpassing many of those regulations and people and many of the thoughts that we think of. And artificial intelligence, for example, and moving towards something called artificial super intelligence, which allows this singularity to happen. You cannot differentiate between reality and basically visualization from a cyber type of space. And this is, yes, it's happening. Yes, there is a huge changing with the processing speeds, with the computing clouds that we see, with many of the IoTs, Internet of Things or Internet of Beings. Now we see it across all of the wearable access. It's good for humanity. It's not only saving lives, it's connecting people. And that's the theme comes of the future city we have in Expo. Again, connecting minds, building future. And that's our goal. Let's connect those minds. Let's really don't have any limitation. Let's surpass and really think of that space. And this is where cybersecurity is an internet part of all of those aspects and need to be there and need to be really across many of those technology advancements happening here and there. Will it be something taken for granted? That's what we want. That's what we hopefully reach to that level if we can really change those mindsets from a cultural perspective and allow the cybersecurity to be embedded in everything by design and allow it to happen by design. Yes, to a level that we reach this prevention.
Correct.
Not protecting, no, prevention. We have a prevention level. There will never be any attack. We take it for granted, allow people to economically, digitally really foster, allow businesses to do all of the things that they have without really caring about security and data breach and many of this. That's our goal, and that's what we need to hopefully achieve throughout all of this collaboration, partnership, and really designs of such great technologies there.
And by when will we reach prevention from protection?
This is all depends on many of the aspects that we see today. How much people will adopt and really have this security as a part of their daily life.
But what do you think? Is it going to be in our near future?
I believe, as my friend, His Excellency mentioned here, human build something, there is always other human will defeat that. So life, there is good and evil, and it will continue to be this in the whole life. So I don't think there is one single shot that is silver bullet, no more bad actors, no more. No, I don't think this will happen. There is a state, there is non-state, there is things happening across us, and this where keeps us alive, keeps every day is different than the day before. And this is where we actually will continue and really strive to achieve those security.
Well, just to add, if we take a look at my point of view, future, I think aviation will be the most dominant, the leader of transportation, because ground is becoming too jammed. The traffic, the ground transportation becomes too heavy, population grows, and etc. So we need to take advantage of this dimension. I believe that we're going to get more and more individual flights, meaning drones or family drones or things like that, that will take us from one place to another. The technology is already here. It's not a Back to the Future Hollywood movie. It's here. Now it will take a couple of years because of regulation and security and safety issues. But once we get that, imagine that we can come from Tel Aviv to Dubai or to Abu Dhabi in a much lesser than 3 hours is the flight, but you need to go 2 hours in advance to the airport and drive to the airport. It will be 3 hours and a half overall from my house to His Excellency's house. And that's, we'll still live and be young enough to enjoy that, I believe.
Wow. And so you'll have his lunch waiting for him when he lands
Definitely.
here. And from a cybersecurity perspective, will it also evolve at that pace to support this kind of infrastructure, you believe?
It must be. It must be. Cybersecurity is the fundamental, the bedrock for any digital advancement. If you don't put enough resources and thinking to design it properly, then all of the pyramid will collapse. It won't stand. So you need to build it by design. The good news, the understanding of the industry, of decision makers, of regulators is there. It's just now for get sleeves up and hands on and work on it.
And when will we reach prevention? He gave a very diplomatic answer. So let me see if you have any other response. Will we reach from protection to prevention during our lifetimes, you believe?
Well, I follow His Excellency's diplomatic approach. I admire it.
Fair enough. Thank you both so much for your time. And it was really interesting, and it'll be really interesting to see, I think, how things evolve. And let's hope there's better awareness and a change in culture so that we're more secure in the future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.